Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. One of the greatest guys in Colorado political history right here. Former senator, former congressman, former CU president, former UNC president, former state legislator. We could just keep doing this. Hank Brown, thanks for being here.
I've had trouble holding the job.
You can't hold the job down. Well, just a stupid question. Out of all these things that you have done, all these incredible things, which one did you like the most?
You know, the best
out of all the jobs.
Best job I ever had was serving in the Navy in a VR squadron.
What's a VR squadron?
Air transport, and we'd fly from Norfolk, Virginia, all over Europe and back to the Pacific, Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, all through Australia, New
So basically,
Zealand.
it was just a cheap way for you to go see the world. Is that
exactly? It was great fun. I think the fact that I was 22 at the time may have helped.
Were you
make
a pilot?
It pleasurable. Navigator.
Navigator on the plane.
Uh-huh.
So when they got lost, it was your job to find out.
We never got lost, that we admitted.
Did you enlist?
I did. I volunteered when I finished graduate school. I volunteered for the Navy and served 3 years, and then I extended a year to get to go to Vietnam.
Excuse me, did you say I extended it a year to get to go to Vietnam?
Well, you had to agree to a full year
tour of duty.
Tour of duty, and I was set to go back to CU to law school and get out just before that, and so CU let me put off going to law school for a year.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding something here. You wanted to go to Vietnam?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Why?
You know, a couple reasons. First of all, I wanted to see Vietnam. This give you a chance to spend a year there.
You could go as a tourist. You don't need to. That sounds dangerous.
But secondly,
what year was that, by the way?
Let's see. That would have been '65. I went over there.
That would be a terrible year to be in Vietnam.
It was a great year.
Tell me why.
It was a great year. You know, I think most people don't realize that our attempt to save the South Vietnamese was probably one of the most moral, ethical endeavors this country's ever engaged in. The North Vietnamese murdered over 40,000 local officials in South Vietnam in '65, '66, in that 1 year period, lapping over into 2 years. They literally, it was tough to get people to run for office because the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese would murder them. But it was basically an invasion of the South by the North. Our press didn't report it that way, but that's what it was, by some of the most brutal massacres you've ever dreamed of.
From your point of view, serving a year, what was your job there? Were you a navigator as well?
When I got there, they gave me administrative duties, and I tried to get transferred to an action unit, and they wouldn't do that. But then I talked the Army into letting me fly with them as a forward air controller. So I spent part of the day in an office and then half the day flying in little L-19s, which was great fun.
Only you would call this great fun. So from your point of view, having been there for a year and then going off to law school, why did it fail? Just quickly, what went wrong?
McNamara. McNamara was opposed to the war and made sure we couldn't win it. The reality was we bombed where no one was and didn't bomb where the key points of the enemy were. So if you go over the Plain of Jars in Laos, it's like the backside of the moon. We bombed the devil out of it where no one was. If you go to Hanoi, you'll find the city of Hanoi largely untouched and the key parts of Haiphong Harbor largely untouched. Moreover, we didn't do a physical interdiction of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which I think was a part of the original plan that they had laid out.
Instead of just doing a bombardment, there should have been some sort of ground action to
Absolutely,
stop it.
because a physical interdiction of the trail would have forced them into a pitched battle where our superiority in artillery and weapons and air support would have made all the difference. And it would have cut off the flow of assassins and and troops going into South Vietnam.
When you came back to CU and you got your law degree, what did you do after that? What was your first job after that?
I had worked while I was in law school for a CPA firm for Arthur Andersen. Well, I had 3 jobs, but
My father worked for Arthur Andersen.
yeah, it was a wonderful experience, and I was planning to go with them, but I got a job offer from Ken Montfort, who ran Montfort of Colorado. It's the world's largest cattle feeding operation at the time, and meatpacking plant and portion food company. And I went to Greeley to work for Kenny. It was a great experience.
When did you first run for office?
In 1972, they created a new Senate district with reapportionment, redistricting, I should say. And I ran for the state Senate and was elected. And I'd work a full day, and I'd serve in the Senate full time. And I served just 1 term, but I enjoyed it greatly.
All right, now, this also amazes me. People like you really bother me because as someone who enjoys being a sloth, people like you, overachievers, really, you make us all look bad. When you were a congressman, do I have this right? You went back and got yet another degree while you were in Congress, in D.C., weren't it? What was that?
Indeed. Well, what had happened was my family was back in Colorado.
Yep.
They stayed in Greeley, and I'd come home every weekend. And the only thing that happens at the receptions in Washington, D.C. at night is either fattening or gets you into trouble. And so what I did was...
Get you into trouble. You want to be more precise about that?
Well, no. I think that covers it. So I took a master's in tax from George Washington University. And when I finished that, I took the CPA exam. And then when I finished that, I taught at Georgetown and American University at night. You can't get paid for it because it's outside income.
You worked without getting paid for it.
Uh-huh.
When you could have gotten into trouble at all the receptions every night, because you don't have to pay for food in D.C. There's always somebody doing a reception or a party or a cocktail, something after hours.
The receptions are the devil's workshop. There's more good food and drink available than anyone could consume, and it's terrible for the waistline.
When did you become a United States Senator?
In January of '91, ran in 1990, so I served 10 years in the House and then a term in the Senate.
Talk to me about your time in D.C. now versus the culture today. What has changed between then and now on the national level, just as far as working as a congressman and a senator? Because you were in the minority and you were in the majority as well, so you got a taste for both sides.
I did. In the Senate, it's easy to get things done, and was enormous fun. And got lots of legislation passed, both in the minority and the majority. So it was a very productive time that I loved. I think one of the things that's happened that's very fundamental is with the drop-off in advertising in printed media, you've had a huge drop-off in their ability to fund reporters. And what's happened then is with the drop in the number of reporters, both at the state level and the federal level, is the reporters used to have read the bills, know what's going on, and report accurately what's happening. And with the cutbacks, their reporting has boiled down to he said, she said. So someone would say something may not be accurate. The reporter wouldn't know whether it's accurate or not. The reporter would just report what was said and then say the other, if they were willing, right, show the other side. So the quality of reporting has dropped dramatically with the loss of reporting staff, and it's a devastating impact for the legislative process. The state suffers from the same thing. Used to be the reporters would actually have read the bills, which not all the members had.
Let's say that again. Not all the members have. I'm always amazed how many state legislators vote on things they never have read. And how often we've actually heard the Nancy Pelosi line of we need to pass the bill to see what's inside the bill.
I think she would rephrase that if she had a chance, but there's a lot of truth in that. The reality was there's always some who read the bills. And what happens is if you do that, you gain a certain amount of credibility and people look to you for advice. And often your best legislators are the ones that do take the time to do that.
This idea that we're more polarized than ever. First, I don't buy that. We're not quite in a civil war yet. There are times before we were alive that things were more polarized. But as far as just working together, is it true, from your point of view, that that we are more polarized? That in D.C. Republicans and Democrats can't work together?
I don't have that view at all. The good legislators are still ones who are able to work across the aisle, develop good ideas, and a great deal of bipartisanship gets things done in Washington. It still happens. What's happened, I think, is that the Democratic Party has become more liberal as time has gone by. The difference between the two parties philosophically has grown greater. So there is a greater gulf there in policy, but not so much in personal contact. And good legislators are ones that bridge that gap.
Why didn't you run for re-election? Why didn't you run for re-election?
One of the things
you only did one term in the Senate.
Well, but
I'd still be there.
I'd served 10 years in the House, so that was 16 years, and then 4 years in the state legislature. One of the things that happens to you in Washington or even in the state legislature is every time you do what the lobbyists or the pressure groups want, they reward you. And every time you don't do what they want, they ding you a little. After a while, most people respond to that pressure, and they do it. The dangerous part is it happens to you without you realizing it. I suppose all Americans respond to the pressure that we're under, but the great example, when you first go to Congress, nobody votes for the tobacco bill. But if you think about it, subsidizing tobacco and then turn around and vote for a program to urge people not to use it, I mean, that takes a lot of flexibility. After you've been there 10 years, you look at the numbers, 95% of the people vote for the tobacco bill. They forget why they're there. Now, some people...
When you say tobacco bill, this is to subsidize tobacco farming.
Yes.
Right.
The dangerous part is it happens to you without you knowing it. I hope I left before that happened to me. I don't know for sure, but I don't think so. And there's always people like a Bill Armstrong who can withstand that pressure and be as strong the last day as he was the first day. But I'm convinced long service in Congress is not to our country's benefit, nor to the person's benefit.
What about the argument that you need to stay there a long time to build up the seniority so that you're in a position of power? You can't be a committee chairman unless you've put in all your time. So, for people who term limit themselves, you're not helping yourself and you're not helping your state by not doing. You need to be a career politician if you love your state.
If your goal is to be a pork barrel legislator, and there's a lot of them, whose goal is to bring money back to the state. So, for example, the folks from the South tend to be inclined that way. They're still fighting the Civil War. The North and West doesn't realize it, but the South is. Sure, staying a long time pays rewards in terms of getting pork barrel spending. But being an effective legislator, it's not necessary. I drafted and carried the legislation that brought the Central Europe into NATO. We had bipartisan support for that bill. The fact that I was a freshman didn't detract at all from my ability to get it done. The wide range of environmental legislation
I remember
it
took President Clinton a little time to come around on that issue.
He was so cute.
He was so cute.
He opposed it vehemently for 3 years. And then a few weeks before the election for re-election, he went before the Polish American Society in Chicago and endorsed the bill, and he sent me a letter thanking me for supporting his initiative.
His initiative. But there's something about politicians that, once the ball is going to go over the goal line, they're happy to grab it and do it.
We were grateful to have a convert, even though it came late.
All right, since we're going to be tight on time, What made you want to switch from that world? I mean, you could go into law, you could do anything that you wanted, and instead you went into higher ed. And I think you saved UNC. It's amazing what you were able to do up in Greeley to get more productivity, to make money go farther, to get more education. But why do that?
You know, I thought it would be a wonderful challenge, and I think everyone knows that what's happened in higher ed.
You're supposed to become a lobbyist. You put in your time, you put up your shingle, and you finally get paid back for your 20 years of service.
You know, they do have, many of the folks get 7-figure jobs when they leave the Senate. To me, it seemed the opportunity to teach would be a lot of fun, and I don't have expensive taste, as my wife will unfortunately confirm. So that wasn't particularly appealing. But I thought the chance to do something in higher education was terrific. UNC is a great institution. The challenge had been we had way overspent on administrative costs. The overhead was way out of line. And over 4 years, we reduced the number of administrators by 100.
By 100?
Over 100.
Wow.
While we were growing enrollment. We transferred $7 million a year out of administration into what I consider the productive part of higher education, the classroom. So faculty and administrative support. We did a lot at CU at the time I was there, not quite as much because the abuses weren't quite as much. But the reality is, where the action is in the university is in the classroom, not in who sits in the administrative office and shuffles paperwork.
I'm always amazed, whether it's K through 12 or higher education, how administration really steers the ship and how much goes to it. Here in Colorado, we've underfunded education, but when you look at it, education funding is going up dramatically, but the number of teachers stays about the same. It's being absorbed in administration.
It is a scandal. Part of it is the way federal assistance to education works. In higher ed, the more it costs, the more you get paid. So the student loan amount that's authorized goes up if the cost is higher. If the cost is lower, the amount you get from the federal government is less. And it has poisoned productivity in higher ed. It's had a similar effect in healthcare, because as you know, the way they set up Medicare originally was the higher your cost, the higher you got, more you got paid, and vice versa. I think they had the best of intention in trying to subsidize these things, but the reality was the disaster in terms of productivity.
From your tenure at UNC and then at CU, my alma mater, and by the way, you never did authorize the honorary doctorate that you promised.
Well, many members of the faculty have had extraordinary things to say about you, John.
I
don't know I think some of them were in Latin.
Yeah. What's your biggest regret from your time in higher ed? The thing that you wanted to get done, but it just wasn't the political power to get it done?
You know, I think there was more to do, I think, in terms of administrative cost at both institutions that can and should be done. I always thought that you could do more in terms of faculty productivity as well with it, and begin to focus more on that. I think when I departed CU, I indicated we'd made all of our goals except one, and that was my strong desire to see someone blow up the engineering building. I mean, it's a gorgeous campus, and that engineering building is slip-form concrete. It's a concrete silo.
Now, that was created during the space race, and they needed to get it up fast, was always the what I heard about it.
I think whoever did it deserves capital punishment. It is an obscene, ugly spot on the most beautiful campus in the world.
Let's bring it to today. Your voice, you and former Governor Bill Owens, both came out against Prop CC, which went down to defeat. Now, this you weren't supposed to do that because both you and Bill supported Rep C 14 years ago. Why did you come out so strongly against Prop CC?
You remembered that sin 14 years ago. Well, first of all, it was not bipartisan. Ref C was a bipartisan effort. I supported Ref C, I think in part because I thought it would save, in the crisis we had where you had a dramatic drop in revenue, I thought it would save the taxpayers' Bill of Rights by making that temporary modification. But I think part of the problem with Double C was it had no credibility. To claim that the Democratic legislature is going to put any money into highways is laughable. When Bill Owens left the governorship, you were having $500 million a year go from the general fund into highways. When the Democrats took over, it dropped to zero. I don't mean it dropped a little, it dropped to zero. And you eliminated funding. It was clear that they were opposed to any money for highways. Now you still have some money from the Highway Users Trust Fund and some other things like that, but the suggestion that the Democratic legislature would fund highways was laughable. The same thing with higher education. Most people don't realize it, but the K through 12, the unionization there provides a lot of money for political campaigns.
I'm shocked, I tell you.
Faculty members at higher education are not unionized largely. Some are, but most are not. And frankly, when Ref C passed, they were supposed to get a third of the increase in money. Instead, they got a cut. I mean, to suggest higher education is going to get more money out of Double C was laughable as well. So it had no credibility.
But adding, when Governor Owens and you came out so early, so strongly, I think there was this sense of, well, you know, these guys understand what we're trying to do. And my sense was, yeah, these guys do understand what you're trying to do. That was a 5-year timeout. This is a forever timeout, and it would destroy the taxpayer Bill of Rights. I wouldn't be surprised if next year there will be a full-on effort to repeal what's left of Tabor altogether, even though it's been weakened by the courts. Is the taxpayer Bill of Rights important for Colorado and our future?
You know, I think of it as a simple, basic proposition that makes common sense. It says simply, look, if you're going to increase taxes, give the people a vote on it. If you're going to spend more, increase spending beyond the growth in population and beyond inflation, give the people a vote on it. Some people question why you have a need for that kind of protection for taxpayers. The first year I served in the state Senate, state spending went up 18% in 1 year.
Wow.
The history of the legislature is not one of overwhelming responsibility in terms of programs. I mean, having said that, Colorado's in much better shape than the federal government, but the reason we are is because we have that mandated balanced budget.
We've only got a few minutes left here, but look forward for me. What do you think the biggest danger is, first for the state and then the nation? I mean, I grew up here. You grew up in Colorado. This is not the Colorado I grew up in. There really was a sense growing up here that people are in charge of their own lives, that they should be free to make the relationships they want and risk. I think there's really that issue of risking your wealth, risking your labor to try to create something. People came here to Colorado to do that. And I feel that culture of making our own decisions is being replaced by a culture of making decisions for other people. What do you think the biggest risk for Colorado is? And then let me ask you the same thing on a national thing. Maybe it's the same answer.
No, it's not. But I think in Colorado there's two things that I'm deeply concerned about. One, the nanny state mentality that you're going to micromanage people's lives, I think is a tragic mistake.
Why?
But I think, why?
Why?
The reality is the reason America is strong and great is because people are motivated. And why are they motivated? They're motivated because they get to make the decisions about their own life and they get to spend their own money. A government that comes along and takes away your right to run your own life and takes away your right to spend the money you produce destroys your initiative to work hard and be productive. The simple fact is our economic future depends on incentives. The second thing that I think is a danger for Colorado is the things that the state government should be doing, they're not doing. The reality is Colorado is growing. It's why I sponsored the Conservation Trust Fund to have open space set aside in advance of growth not destroy people's property rights, but we should have adequate transportation corridors and utility corridors laid out for the Front Range already. We're going to grow. The state has grown a great deal. It's going to grow even more. But what's happened is we've had people simply refuse to deal with the problems. It's everything from Governor Lamb killing W-470, which tripled the cost on the state level and left it with much less capacity.
And here we are 40 years later, and it's still not done.
The reality is, sex education hasn't done the job it should because highways don't cause people. They honestly thought when they killed W-470 that highways caused people. They don't. We grew in spite of it. If you look at our water problems.
Our population grew no matter what.
Yes, and the population's going to grow no matter what we do with water. The problem is, by not facing up to our water problems and improperly working in that area, what we've done is force the drying up of our farm ground.
1 minute left. Same question from the federal level. What's the biggest worry?
I don't think a democratic republic can survive without a balanced budget amendment or something akin to it. Congress has proved that they simply can't be rational about the spending that we're doing. And we will destroy the country unless we get that under control. And I think you have to do it with a constitutional amendment.
Destroy the country. Seriously, destroy the country if we keep spending the way we're spending.
Absolutely. There's no question that within 15 years we're going to see the cash balance for Social Security gone. We're going to see the cash balance for Medicare gone before that. And you're also going to see huge consequences of what happens when you can't borrow more money and people, instead of bringing their dollars to America to invest, begin to take their dollars away.
Senator, I can't thank you enough for spending time with me and everything you've done for me personally. I'm just so grateful. Thank you for everything you do for Colorado, too.
John,
I got to
good to
run.
be with you.
Listen for me on KO Radio, read me in the Denver Post, and we'll see you next week.